Hello, I am Nurbek Savitakhunov. You're watching the news from Kazakhstan, and these are the top stories. Defense began presenting its case during the Janauzian violence trial. Attorneys insist their clients are not guilty, while defendants' families claim they were put under pressure. Vladimir Kozlov, the leader of opposition party Alga, pending registration, will be soon transferred to Aktau, where he will be tried on charges of inciting social hatred. The International Tea Exhibit has opened in the capital of Kazakhstan, a country considered one of the global leaders in tea consumption. The trial of policemen is nearing completion. The closing arguments of the parties will be presented to the judge today, on Tuesday, May 15th. The last few witnesses, namely doctors who provided first aid to policemen during the Janauzian violence, testified in court yesterday. None of the questioned witnesses were able to tell the exact number of injured officers admitted to hospitals. Several of the doctors contradicted their previous testimonies given their pre-trial investigation.
You've heard the responses of police representatives. All of this is called nonsense. Of course, the court is to make the ruling. Yet, summarizing their statements made before noon, all of them claimed to see people throwing rocks, glass and gas bottles. However, none of them heard gunshots or assault rifle firing. How trustworthy is this? Attorneys especially emphasized that the testimonies of the witness by Zakov do not match. The judge agreed to take this into account. All police officers say they were in the middle or the end of the formation and therefore do not know who first opened fire and who gave the order. One of the law enforcement officers of Karakia, Mohammed Girbayev, said he didn't know who gave the order to open fire, but his colleagues told him that the order was indeed given. It's worth noting that during the hearing, reporters experienced technical failure in a special room for journalists. Public activist Andrei Tsukanov, who is monitoring the trial, says the sound feed interruptions occurred right during the questioning of the police witnesses. The quality of sound is extremely low here at the courtroom. In the press room, you may barely hear anything. And the problem started the very moment they began calling for the police witnesses. During questioning of the victims, witnesses, civilians and doctors, there were no problems with the sound. Yet, the sound quality became worse when the police was questioned.
On Tuesday, parties continued exchanging closing arguments at the Janauzian violence trial. Attorneys of the 37 defendants charged with the organization and participation in mass disorders asked the court for a not guilty verdict. Lawyers believe the investigation of the case was conducted with gross violations, including tortures used to obtain confessions and testimonies of witnesses and defendants.
For instance, attorney Tleukulov, who is representing defendants Utkilov, Shamilov, Tadjenov and Bigzhanov, asked the court to consider the fact that it hasn't been proven during the hearings that his clients destroyed any property. Yet the investigation authorities accused Utkilov of mass disorder organization. The attorney posed a reasonable quest, asks of whether a simple worker has the ability of resources to set up a mass riot. Two other defendants, Shamilov and Bigzhanov, have absolutely nothing to do, neither with oil workers nor strikers and their demands. Their involvement in the situation was confirmed only by anonymous witnesses who gave confounding testimonies. The remaining attorneys will present their defense arguments on Tuesday. To recap, the prosecutor requested terms ranging from 1 to 9 years in prison for the defendants.
Vladimir Kozlov, the leader of the opposition party Alga, pending registration, as well as public activist Serik Sapargali, will be transferred from Almaty detention facility to Aktau. Kozlov's spouse, Aliya Turuzbekova, who learned of the news from the politician's lawyer, says the decision was made in connection to the fast-approaching conclusion of the Janauzian trials. Both activists were arrested in January on charges of inciting social hatred, and their arrest terms have been extended several times now, even before the beginning of trials.
The opposition leader Vladimir Kozlov and civic activist Serik Sapargali are being transferred from Almaty to the western Kazakhstan. Aliya Turuzbekova, the wife of Alga party leader, believes the trial on the case of defendants charged with inciting social hatred will start not earlier than July. The preliminary investigation hasn't been completed yet, and at the moment the case has 102 volumes of documents. As Kozlov told his wife during her last visit to prison, the hearing will be in Kazakh language. They will be transferred by train, so the trip to Aktau will take about 2 weeks. And then there will be a 10-day quarantine, when no lawyer or anyone else has a right to see them. So we will know everything only at the beginning of June. Yet another person charged with the infamous social hatred offense also has some news. National security investigator informs Janbolat Mamai that he must come to Aktau to view the case files. The politician believes that the trial will start in August.
На нас будет заведено 2 уголовных дела, то есть это не только разжигание социальной розни.
Most likely, there will be 2 criminal cases against us, not only inciting social hatred, but also creation of organized crime group, or crime committed as a part of the organized crime group, with the intent of inciting social hatred. We believe and we know with a degree of certainty that the trial will start in August.
Можно с уверенностью примерно уже знать, что в августе состоятся судебные процессы.
Civic activist Rasaral Kuanshalin was following the descendants' investigation conducted in the informational isolation. He believes that the hearing will be closed for the public so that people cannot realize how absurd the charges are, as it's currently happening with the case of Zhanaozen oil workers who went on strike.
Они не могут найти никаких, фактов для того, чтобы их обвинить. Нету их вины.
They cannot find any facts to charge them. People are innocent, and this is why the authorities had to extend their arrest terms. They've done it 4 times now. If the authorities knew in advance that the activists were guilty and they had facts, this wouldn't have happened, but it did. What we see is the authorities buying time in hopes that they will find some evidence. Only time and investigation will show what the sentence will be. Some observers believe that the worst verdict is reserved for the Alga leader. The authorities might also call up fake witnesses who will increase the degree of punishment for Vladimir Kozlov. Meanwhile, while in prison, he has already written 35 pages of the case analysis and 22 petitions to the investigator relating to the facts of the claim.
A well-known Kazakh artist, Kanat Ibragimov, as well as public activists Larisa Bayar and Bakhadjan Tarigozhina, were released from prison on Monday after serving their 15-day sentence while behind bars. Tarigozhina submitted 11 complaints to the detention facility head. None of them were officially recognized, although all reported violations have been resolved. The political prisoners are said to be outraged about the conditions of their detention, but are still eager to continue their public activity.
I would like to appeal to all dissenters in Kazakhstan. You need to leave your disagreements behind. They only benefit the silently aggressive majority and the punishers. To recap, on April 28, the Specialized Inter-District Administrative Court of Almaty convicted Bakhadjan Tarigozhina, the head of Ar-Ruhak Public Association, Larisa Bayar, a board member of the Leave People's Homes Alone Public Association, and activists in Socialist Movement of Kazakhstan, as well as renowned artist Kanat Ibragimov, for organization and active participation in the dissenters' rally. They were sentenced to 15 days in special temporary detention facility. It's worth noting that none of them were proven guilty of misdemeanor. In fact, neither of the 3 have participated in the rally nor organize it. I'm eternally grateful to our Russian brothers for choosing a monument of Abay, a significant figure of the Kazakh culture, as the rally point against Putin's inhumane dictatorship and despotism. This proves once again that the people of culture, they cannot be out of touch with politics or free of their own people. True and genuine cultural figures will always serve their people.
Kazakh citizens residing in Moscow, Russia, continue to show their support of the local opposition. In addition, members of the Social Resistance Group of Kazakhstan held a rally in Moscow on Sunday, with participants calling for more attention to the arrests of dissidents in Kazakhstan, as well as unfairness in the Zhanaozen trial. Unfortunately, this time Moscow authorities chose a very strange place for such an event. The location is in the center of the capital, yet it's a low-traffic area in the park next to the Borders Guard's monument, surrounded by a roadway, and with the Kazakh embassy a few kilometers away from the picket. Supposedly, the protesters were driven this far because their usual place for holding rallies next to Griboyedov's monument is occupied by dissenting Muscovites. In fact, Russian opposition groups were camped at the Griboyedov monument, but half a kilometer away at a monument to Kazakh poet Abay. The activists of Kazakh Socialist Movement managed to make up for a small picket the next day. Knowing about the ongoing human rights and protest seminars and lectures for dissenters held at Occupy Abay camp, Aynur Kurmanov conducted a 15-minute seminar for Moscow residents about the Zhanaozen violence and the fight of Kazakh citizens for their rights and freedoms. The trial of 37 oil workers, participants and leaders of the strike, has been underway for several months now. On Sunday, May 13th, the prosecutor requested 5 to 9 years for defendants. Once again, this shows the nature of a regime that is determined to showcase the punishment of participants and leaders of the strike. Russian opposition also continues to hold protest actions in Moscow. On Sunday, a 10,000-person crowd, led by several prominent writers, held what was dubbed the Test March, or the Sunday Stroll, along Rождественский Boulevard, from Pushkin to Griboyedov monuments. The idea of a test walk was proposed by a famous writer and a participant of white rallies, Boris Akunin, via his blog. The writer suggested his famous colleagues and all interested citizens walk across downtown Moscow. The purpose of this walk is an experiment. Is it possible for Muscovites to walk freely in their own town, or do they need to get a special pass, the writer wondered, after the dispersal of the rally on May 6th and 7th. This time, however, the trip was a success. Thousands of people headed by famous writers and musicians have safely reached Chistые prudy, carrying no posters and shouting no slogans. The only symbol of the action was a white ribbon. The police did not interfere and even block traffic on the boulevard ring to let the crowd pass. Authorities did not understand anything, or they simply thought that they are seeing things. Yet this was real. Our country has changed, but the government remains the same. Therefore, the authorities should either quickly change or we will have to part with them. I do not see any other logical conclusions. I really like the fact that today the authorities were smart enough not to engage the OMON riot police. In fact, I haven't seen a single policeman so far, and I feel great. Luckily, common sense prevailed today. I was deeply touched by the police lieutenant who told us to mind the steps, but the truth is, once this lieutenant receives a command to handcuff me, he will. Members of Kazakhstan's cultural elite question the effectiveness of similar protest actions. For instance, writer Tursun Jurtbay says he wouldn't join a march across city streets and adds that citizens of the country became passive in recent years. This is proven by infrequent rallies held in Almaty, attended by virtually the same people. Tursun Jurtbay, a famous Abai expert, keeps an eye on the events in Russia. He's not at all surprised that a renowned Kazakh enlightener has become a symbol of the Russian opposition. At the same time, he's certain that the Occupy Abai movement would not catch on in Kazakhstan, if only because people seem indifferent to their own lives. The writer would support the opposition walk by Moscow's intellectuals, but just as an eyewitness, as he's reluctant to join the march himself. No one is going to join, even me. We seem to be going through changes, but there are none, per se. Kazakhstan's Foreign Affairs Ministry is reluctant to comment on the Moscow protests near the Abai monument. The only thing the official representative of the ministry had to say on the matter in his weekly briefing is that Kazakhstan diplomats are not under any direct threat, despite the embassy's close proximity to the location of the rally.
The Russian party is taking all the necessary measures to ensure security and working order of our diplomatic mission in Moscow.
Occupy Abai is no longer just a top trend on Russian Twitter, but also a name of a newspaper and website. The opposition at Moscow's Chistые prudy now has its own publication, with the first issue published on the donations collected via the internet. In the meantime, the Cyrillic country-coded website occupyabai.rf has become a real guide featuring extensive information about the opposition movement, up-to-the-minute news from the Chistые prudy camp, as well as live Twitter feeds. Authorities kicked people out from the lawns on Occupy Abai. Oh la lo. Kazakhstan joins Occupy Abai. Freedom to all political prisoners. Vladimir Kozlov from Kazakhstan might face a prison term for dissent. According to reports broadcast on the Dozht channel from Chistые prudy, the crowd is not being dispersed at Chistые prudy. A state official from the environmental department came to Occupy Abai and demanded to clear the lawns. Everything was then placed on the benches. Theater Dog performed the play titled Berlus Putin near the monument to Abai Kunanbayev at Chistые prudy. The play is based on the novel by Dario Fo, a recipient of the 1997 Nobel Prize in Literature. Ilya Yashin said that municipal officials came over and started filling some papers. Paddy wagons are being deployed at Chistые prudy. Berlus Putin, the Russian version of Dario Fo's infamous play The Two-Headed Anomaly, was performed at Chistые prudy last night. The original plot takes a jab at the recently resigned Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, who is visited by Vladimir Putin at the beginning of the play. In the meantime, President Nazarbayev is conducting a visit to Belarus, where he had already informally met with his colleague Alexander Lukashenko on Monday. Nazarbayev and Lukashenko met in an informal setting at the Belovezhskaya Pushcha Reserve, the location most known as a place where Belovezhskaya Accord was signed to dissolve the USSR. According to Belarusian media, the talks were mainly about trade and economic cooperation between the two countries, as well as on a common free market zone between Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Russia. Several observers note that the meeting in Belovezhskaya Pushcha was held in advance of the CIS and Collective Security Treaty Organization summits scheduled to take place on May 15th in Moscow. Maksut Narikbayev, former chairman of the Lawyers' Party Adilet, said on Monday that he does not rule out the possible merger with Nursultan Nazarbayev's ruling party, Nuratan. In his interview to the Megapolis newspaper, Narikbayev said that only a few parties with the necessary financial and human resources should be active in the country's political field, representing public interests of the population.
We have much in common with Nuratan party. First of all, it is the party of the leader of the nation. While in coalition, both of our parties supported the candidacy of the leader of the nation during the presidential elections and now support his cause for modernization and development of the country. At the same time, we hold a more critical stance towards the government and its approach in implementing President's strategic plan. The ex-leader of Adilet party said that his reasons for merging with Nuratan might be the ruling party's actions targeting the improvement of democracy and development of the country, namely the formation of semi-presidential republic, strengthening of the parliament, raising of the governmental responsibility and further development of the judicial power independence. Narikbayev also noted that the decision was taken after the parliamentary elections where Adilet party received less than 1% of the votes. The ruling party made a step forward, and Erlan Karin, a secretary at Nuratan, said during an interview that he didn't exclude the possibility of merging.
23-year-old Darkhan Mukhajanov was killed in a brawl this weekend in the Khachir district of the Pavlodar region. The victim was shot in the head and later died in hospital. According to some reports, local residents believe the initial incident was fueled by ethnic hatred, although the police denies it so far.
According to official information sources, a 23-year-old man brought his friends to the house of his offenders after his acquaintances were beaten up by fellow villagers. The group of 10 people then started breaking the fences and windows in the house. A shot was fired back from the hunting rifle, taking the life of Darkhan Mukhajanov. 3 people were detained for disorderly conduct and inflicting grave injuries. The murder suspects have not been identified yet. According to locals, members of Chechen, Ingush, Ukrainian, Uzbek and Kazakh communities all were witnessed to take part in the fight. This hasn't been confirmed by the Internal Affairs Department, although it still deployed special police forces in the area to prevent further clashes. We've sent special police forces and department officials from Pavlodar in order to investigate and solve the crime.
More shooting was reported last night, this time in the Karaganda region. The exchange of fire took place during a high-speed pursuit of organized group members who opened fire at the police.
The incident took place on the Priazorsk-Sarashagan highway. The 4-car passengers ignored the police order to stop the car and instead rammed in and opened fire at law enforcement officers. The policemen followed them and pursued and exchanged fire. It was not until they reached Sarashagan village that the criminals were stopped and arrested. 2 of the criminals appeared to be wounded and were brought to the hospital. Other 2 were taken to the temporary detention facility. 3 sawed-off guns and over 20 cartridges were found in the suspect's car. The use of service guns by the prosecutor's officials has been justified and confirmed legal.
Following the example of their Karaganda colleagues, the Kostanay Regional Prison Monitoring Committee decided to suspend its operation in the area. Human rights activists say that law enforcement officers do everything in their power to prevent proper monitoring of local detention facilities.
Prisoners in Kostanay region were left face-to-face with the penitentiary system. Human rights activists have seized the work of the Observation Commission here. Quite simply, they are not let inside the prison institutions. The activists appeal to the leadership of law enforcement bodies with an open letter. Among other things, they demand to stop tortures and forcing the prisoners into unpaid labor. We appeal with the demands to the Prosecutor General of Kazakhstan and Interior Minister to publicly discuss the facts of limitations or denial of access for Public Observation Commission to the prison facilities. Every such episode should be carefully investigated, verified and made public. A well-known human rights activist, Evgeny Zhovtits, warned that if these demands do not meet in response, Kazakhstan Human Rights Bureau will call all its staff from the Observation Commission. In the eyes of the international community, this will be evidence enough that the state doesn't meet its international obligations. Based on his personal experience, the recently pardoned, respected expert explains that the issue is rooted in the Soviet barracks rudiments. The examples of this are marching drills, obligatory exercises, and the existence of law and order councils composed of prisoners. prisoners. Another problem of the penitentiary system is corruption. The hopelessness of the situation forces some prisoners to attempt escapes, with the most recent case reported on May 3rd in Kazakhstan detention facility. This is a reflection of several problems, not just one. This includes corruption in a number of institutions. We can recall similar cases not only here, but also in Aktau. There's also the fact that the people are attempting escapes because they don't believe that their cases will be properly investigated. All 5 previously escaped detainees were captured, while 11 employees of the temporary detention facility were fired. The fast and swift reaction is a good sign for the observers. This means that the internal affairs leadership wants to prevent similar incidents in the future. However, how far it will go in its intent to put everything in order, and if it will allow observers into detention centers and prisons, will depend on the law enforcement authorities' response to the human rights activists' ultimatum.
Serik Akhmetov, the first deputy chief of cabinet, said on Monday he expects life to flourish in Kazakhstan's monotowns, settlements with economies based on single enterprises. More than $3 billion will be invested in the development of such towns in the Karaganda region alone.
We are making it clear for the heads of administration that they can't just do nothing and expect the national budget to cover all costs. They must exploit their own potential, work with major industrial companies and make things right in a specific city or district. They need to develop municipal infrastructure, and all those issues must add up to the huge potential for developing the city. Kazakhstan settlements existing due to town-forming enterprises might face serious problems in 10 years already. When natural resources will be depleted, most of the town residents will be left unemployed. The situation requires urgent attention already now. The proposed solution is the program for the development of monotowns, settlements with economies dominated by a single industry or company. Out of 27 risk zone towns, more than a third are located in the Karaganda region. It is expected that by the year 2015, around $4 billion will be invested in 8 monotowns in the mining region. With these funds at his disposal, the head of the Karaganda region is committed to increase the coal and gas extraction, along with the production of agricultural goods and electric energy, development of mining and metal industries, and also improvement of transportation and tourist infrastructure.
While speaking in Parliament, representatives of the Finance Ministry revealed the amount of the country's external debt, which totals $123.8 billion, or 66% of the GDP.
The national and holding companies are particularly noted for the accumulation of foreign debt. Quasi-public sector's loans are estimated at $21 billion. On Monday, outraged MPs proposed to cut salaries of organizations' senior managers who enjoy posh lifestyles amid increasing risks. In response to these arguments, Bolot Jamishev said that the government proposes to set limits on foreign loans, which should be no more than 60% of GDP. External loans for many national companies should be banned, except for companies which are part of the Samruk Kazana, Kazagro and Development Bank of Kazakhstan. For all other companies, it would be quite enough to look for the investments in the domestic market.
Kazakhstan is among the top 5 countries with the highest consumption of tea. The statistics were revealed during the International Tea Exhibit currently underway in Astana.
Cans, sachets and boxes of tea, Astana hasn't witnessed such a diversity in a while. The exhibition dedicated to the age-old drink opened in the capital on Monday. Exporters from all over the world come here to promote their product and expand customer base. This man, with a name so complicated even organizers avoid pronouncing it, is the head of the Indian Tea Council. He says that Kazakhstan is the most important destination for his business. Although he did call the country Tajikistan a few times, the guest pretended that never happened, just like in the best traditions of tea ceremonies. In total, India exports more than 40% of produced tea to Kazakhstan. Many exported tea varieties are of highest quality. Konstantin Vapnuryak from Astana knows well that Kazakhstan is one of the leaders of tea consumption. His company specializes in sales of elite varieties of tea, and his main customers are people with above-average income. Various state institutions are Konstantin's clients as well. In fact, his favorite and most loyal customer is the Finance Ministry. Officials drink different varieties of tea. Some order green, while others prefer black. Of course, right now is the perfect time for black tea. It all depends on the season. There are some varieties of tea, such as puer or tiguanini, which are considered quite expensive. These varieties are sold compressed or weighted. There are not many customers who buy them, but still there are some, and state agencies are among them, of course. Nevertheless, at the online procurement website, the tea is mainly requested by the education department, which buys it for secondary, boarding and vocational schools. The regular choice of tea is a classic black Assam, which costs about $10 per kilo. At the same time, state organizations seem to show no interest in the sachet tea. Our employees drink tea only during the lunchtime at their own expense. We don't have any budget allocated for the procurement of tea or other such things.
На любовь к чаю в Казахстане не влияют даже скандалы.
In Kazakhstan, the love for tea is not affected even by scandals. For instance, dangerous pesticides, some of which even cause genetic disorders, were found present in regularly imported grades of tea. The country's consumption rate, though, seems unaffected by the episode, with 22 million kilograms or almost 3 billion liters of tea consumed a year.
Hollywood celebrities are speaking Kazakh now. The third part of the long-awaited Men in Black franchise was fully translated and dubbed into Kazakh for local distribution.
Biz kimbiz? Onu ешкім bilmeydi. Mіндетimiz жerdегі өзге ғаламшарлықтарды бақылау.
Флако, саған мұнда шығуыңа рұқсат берілген жоқ қой. Кімді айтасың? Саспа қара, олар мені іздеп жүр. Оқтың ба? Қызық, иә, ересек екі адам қабырғамен сөйлесе дағал ол жауап береді. Былық. Ей, бірақ біз оны ұмытайық.
The film in Kazakh will be released in all theaters on May 24th. $135,000 for the Kazakh dubbing of the movie was allocated by the Samru-Kazana Foundation. To complete the work, specialists were invited from Japan, USA, Great Britain. This is the first foreign motion picture fully redubbed into Kazakh after the animation hit Cars 2.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.